Hello and welcome to Phishing with Gophish, the 14th video as part of our Red Team Fundamentals mini-series. First of all, welcome back. We've taken a short break from uploading videos as I was on holiday, and as unprepared that I am, we did not have any videos to release in the meantime. However, we are expected to release as per our usual schedule on Monday afternoons, more specifically 3 p.m. GMT. So expect to see some more exciting content coming your way. Also, you might have noticed that the audio has improved. I've replaced my older microphone with a newer one, so hopefully now I should sound crisper and there's less echo as I speak. I'm aware that my older microphone was a lot quieter as well, so hopefully this one sorts out both of these issues. Anyway, back to our topic. In this video, we will be delving into phishing attacks, their types, how they work, and practically setting up a complete infrastructure for conducting phishing attacks. The core component that will make everything we discuss will be Gophish, which is an advanced phishing tool that has the capability to send out mass phishing emails, monitor who clicked on those emails, and even capture credentials which can be used for later stages of an assessment. As per usual, everything we teach in this video is purely for educational purposes. We take no responsibility for your actions. Now, before we proceed, there are some things we need to clear up. In order to follow this video step by step, there are several prerequisites to it. Whilst not mandatory, and theoretically you could replicate everything on a local network, as is typically the case on real assessments, you generally won't be operating in this manner. Therefore, to establish a phishing infrastructure, we will need three things. A Linux VPS, which Gophish will be hosted on. For production environments, a minimum of 8 GB of RAM is typically recommended, but we are just learning about it, so 2 GB will suffice. Now, there are numerous VPSs out there, and you can do your research on the cheapest option. However, we found that OVH Cloud offers the cheapest and stable solution for us. Now, more specifically, we will be using their VPS2 package that is running Ubuntu. Now, another thing we will need is an SMTP relay service, which will handle email delivery from Gophish to our targets. Again, there are numerous providers out there. However, SparkPost provide us with a free allowance of 500 emails per month, which is more than enough in this case. And lastly, we'll obviously need a domain name from which the phishing emails will be sent from. Now, once more, there are numerous providers, so you'll have to do your research. However, we managed to obtain a domain name for as cheap as £1. And for those in America, I think that's like $1.20, maybe $1.30. Though depending on the domain name you choose, this price may differ. So with these three components in place, you can follow this video with ease. However, as a challenge for you, I will leave it for you to set up an entire infrastructure locally, which will also get you tinkering around with various technologies that are typically involved in such setups. And one last thing, the table that you can see there below contains the fundamental DNS infrastructure that we will employ during our operations. Now, more specifically, we will use salesforce.authidp.com as our phishing interface for landing pages. More specifically, the page that the user will be redirected to once they fall victim to the phishing email, and mail.salesforce.authidp.com, from which all emails will be delivered from. Now, the concept of phishing as we know it today is very broad. As technologies have evolved, they've introduced a variety of new technologies in which attackers can abuse them for profit. It goes without saying that phishing attacks continue to grow in sophistication. And with the advancement of AI, this concern is more pressing than ever. Whilst discussing each technique is obviously irrational, the table that you are seeing highlights the 4 common phishing techniques today. In the first row there, we have a phishing technique known as email phishing. And this is one of the oldest techniques of phishing that takes advantage of electronic mail or email. And an attacker will typically send an email that will appear from a trusted source, like a bank or a government agency, containing some attachments or links to external resources. Now, on the second row, you can see spear phishing. I know this may sound confusing, but such phishing attacks can be performed in numerous different ways. However, the fundamental principle is that only a specific group of individuals are targeted, rather than a mass amount. For instance, these users may be IT administrators, which often hold the keys to the fortress, or HR staff, which are commonly uneducated about phishing, as well as others may be. And lastly, on the third and fourth row, we have smishing and vishing, which the former is a phishing technique performed over text messages and the latter performed over a call. Now, regardless of which phishing technique is employed, the principle that drives such attacks is social engineering. If we could get users to perform instructed actions on their own behalf, then we could leverage that to perform various actions, such as getting them to run a program, supply, or even reveal some sensitive information. Now, as an example of a phishing email in action, have a look at a received email from supposedly Salesforce. It is reporting that an unusual activity on Sergey's account has been observed. To review that activity, a link is provided to what appears to be a Salesforce login. Of course, to you, this may appear like a clear phishing attack given the malicious-like domain and the lack of formatting, but for somebody who is in HR and utilizes Salesforce every day, such an email might not raise immediate concern, and if played right, might even get the user into revealing sensitive information. Now, the email you are seeing specifically plays on the most fundamental aspect of human psychology: urgency and concern. In fact, research shows that individuals are typically most responsive to emails that generate a sense of fear and uncertainty, particularly fear that relates to account security issues, as is this case, outstanding invoices, or other time-sensitive notifications requiring immediate attention. Now, although phishing and social engineering go hand in hand, in this video, we will purely focus on conducting such phishing attacks, as you can see in the example there, as the theory behind psychology and social engineering falls way beyond our scope. So what is Gophish? As I said before, Gophish is a phishing framework that allows us to conduct phishing attacks on a mass scale. So if we select Learn More here, you'll be able to quickly glance over Gophish's features. It allows us to easily create or import phishing templates. It includes a UI interface, a full HTML editor, allowing it or making it easy to customize your templates. You can launch campaigns in the background. You can also launch campaigns at a scheduled time. And it also provides us the capability of tracking our results. So essentially who clicked on those emails, who submitted data. So as you can see here in this image, you can see the amount of emails that have been sent, emails that have been opened, emails that have been clicked, or the links that have been clicked, and the data that has been submitted. So it really is an advanced tool, and during your assessments when you are conducting phishing attacks, you will want a tool like this, because sending out phishing emails per user is simply irrational. Okay, so to download the tool, it is hosted on GitHub. It is open source, if not figured out already. So Gophish is currently within its version 0.12.1. If we go down here, we will find its assets, and specifically we will choose this second row because we are running a 64-bit version of Linux, and I suggest that you do perform your campaigns, or you do install Gophish on a Linux system because it's typically easier to manage and easier to configure. So what I'm going to do here is right click, select copy link, and within my VPS, keep in mind I am operating and installing all of this on that VPS that I've mentioned before. So I'll use curl to download the asset. I'll also use S for silent mode, L to follow redirects, which is useful when you are copying from GitHub links like we just did, and then also capital case O to save the file within the current directory. And then lastly, of course, we'll need the link. So we just provide the link here, select enter, and our download should begin. Now, of course, we are going to need to extract this, and to do so, I will use unzip, but before doing so, I will need to install it because I don't think it comes installed by default. So I'll use apt install unzip. So the installation should proceed. And then by using the unzip command, passing it the archive, so gophish.zip, and then also the D switch to save it within a directory of specification. So we just specify Gophish here. Now, one of the main files that you will be dealing with when performing phishing attacks using Gophish is going to be the config.json file. And essentially all that this file is a configuration of how your Gophish server will be set up. So if we use Vim to open up the file itself, we'll see here that we have two important properties. We have admin server, and then also we have fish server. Now we do have other properties such as db name, db path, migrations prefix, but you typically don't really need to worry about any of these. These two here, the fish server and the admin server, are going to be the properties that you will be configuring most of the time. Now, the admin server property specifies the server for which you will connect to, so you will conduct all of your operations through. So essentially, you will configure Gophish to say, use this template, specify emails, etc. And then the fish server will be used to perform the phishing attack. It will be the server for which will host your landing pages, the interfaces for which the victims will interact with once they fall victim. Now, the listen URL property specifies the address and ports where the admin server will listen for connections. Now, we have several properties here we need to configure. The first one we are going to configure is the listening URL. And essentially this specifies the address, the IP address, and the port on which the server will listen on. Now, currently it is set up to listen locally. 127.0.0.1 specifies a local address, so we won't be able to connect to the server remotely. And to connect to the server remotely, we can either specify our IP address of our VPS, or we can also specify 0.0.0.0 to listen on all interfaces. Now, as for the port, currently we have 3333. You can change this if you want to, but we'll leave it as default. Now, the other important properties that you have is use TLS, cert path, and key path. And essentially what this specifies is whether the admin server will use TLS or not. Now, it is currently configured to use a self-signed certificate, that Gophish implements for us. So we don't need to generate one of our own. And as you can see here, by default, it is using TLS. Now, again, this is not really important from the client side perspective. It's important to obviously keep data secure and keep our transfer secure. But we can use self-signed certificates because we will be only interacting with that server and not the victim. Now, the fish server property that you can see here specifies the configuration for which the client will interact with, or the configuration that will apply for the client. So as with the admin server property, the listen URL property here specifies the IP address on which the phishing server will listen on. Currently, it is set up to listen on any interface on port 80. So when the client falls victim and visits the page for which we might be hosting some phishing content, they will be redirected to a HTTP website. Now, of course, we don't want to be doing that because that is obviously a red flag for the victim, because I'm pretty sure everybody now is aware. Well, not everybody per se, but majority of people are now aware that, whenever you don't have that green check mark in the corner of your URL that specifies it is a safe website, people will typically not visit it or not supply any data. So in our case, we are going to remove port 80 here and specify port 443. And in the case of use TLS, we're going to specify true. Now, of course, we are going to need a certificate, and to generate a certificate, you can do so for free if you have a domain and you can prove ownership of that domain. And the service that allows us to do so is Let's Encrypt. So I'm actually going to remove these two values here, example.key as well, and we'll generate a certificate of our own. Now, to generate a certificate, you will need what is known as an Acme client, and this will be the software that communicates with a CA to request certificates. Now, there are several options available depending on the system you are hosting Gophish server on. However, as we are hosting this on Ubuntu, we can simply use Certbot. Now, to install Certbot, we use apt install certbot here. There are other installation methods to install this, but this is very simple. And once installed, we can simply use the certbot command with the version switch type that in incorrectly, certbot with the version switch to confirm its version. And as you can see here, our version is 2.11.0. Now, to generate a new certificate using certbot, we can use obviously the cert bot command. We're also going to use cert only as the argument for certbot, and essentially this instructs certbot to generate a new certificate without installing it. And then also we're going to need to provide several key switches. So we will use a switch D to specify the target domain for which we are requesting a certificate for. Now, if you recall at the start of our video, we said that we will be using a domain as our interface for the phishing attacks, or for the interface that the victim will interact with. And this domain will be salesforce.auth-idp.com. Now, we will also need to specify a verification method we will use to verify ownership of our domain. And this is specified via the preferred, I think it's preferred challenges switch. And we will use DNS as the value, as through this value, we can create TXT records within our DNS configuration to prove ownership of our domain. And this will make sense shortly, so just bear with me. And lastly, we will specify the manual switch that specifies that we are creating the certificate in an interactive prompt. So if we select enter here, you'll see that we are prompted to provide an email address for which notifications will be sent regarding certificate renewals and security notices. So in my case, I will provide my HackerForce email. Selecting enter here, you will be prompted to read the terms of service. Now, if you've not read it, I suggest that you read through it. And once you have, you can simply press Y here. And then finally, you will be asked whether you'd like to share that email address that you provided with EFF. In our case, we don't. No, thank you. So we'll select N, and the certificate or the proof of verification will be presented to us. Now, to configure this or to prove identity, what it's asking here is to deploy a TXT record under the following name. So the following name is acme challenge.salesforce.authidp.com, and it also needs to provide this following value. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to copy this name of the DNS TXT record. I will go into Ionos, as that is the service provider I'm using to configure my domains. And then we'll go into the DNS section here, and then we'll select the add record button here, add a new TXT record, and these two values for the host name, the value, are the values you need to provide that was generated with certbot. So for the host name, we copied the initial value there, and then this randomly generated string will be the proof of identity. So we will just copy this, paste it within the value section here, select save, and typically give it like 1 to 2 minutes for the DNS settings to implement, and then you will be able to press continue to prove identity. So after allowing some time for the DNS changes to propagate, we'll select enter here, and should everything be successful, we should see a pair of certificates generated for us. And we have the certificate right here. It was successfully generated, so this is the certificate, and then also we have the private key. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to copy both of these values. So I'm just going to copy one actually, because I can supply the other. Go into my configuration file again. And within the cert path, I will provide the complete path to the certificate. And then for the key path, it will be the same, but I will just remove this full chain.pem and replace it with a privkey.pem. Perfect. And with that, we have configured TLS for our phishing server. So all that's left now is to verify that the certificate has correctly installed. Now, before we can verify that the domain is running with TLS, we'll obviously need to add a record of it. I did not show how to do this earlier, so I do apologize. You'll select the add record button here, And then we will add an A record, which will essentially assign an IPv4 address to the domain or subdomain. So we'll specify the domain being salesforce.auth.idp.com, and then for the IP address of your VPS. Once that's done, we can simply select save here, and the A record will be added. So whenever somebody now visits salesforce.authidp.com, they will be redirected to our VPS, which will be hosting our phishing server. And by using the open SSL command with the S client argument along with the connect switch, we will be specifying the domain for which is running our phishing server of idp.com. Specify the port here as well, and essentially what this command will do is attempt to establish a TLS connection to that domain. And by clicking enter here, we will be presented with a lot of information. However, going up here a little, you can see some certificate information up here. And the most important property is the subject field, which specifies the domain for which the certificate is issued to, and then the issuer field that specifies who issued the certificate. In our case, that is Let's Encrypt. And one last thing that I want to note is that the certificate will have an expiry date of 3 months. So you can see here November the 27th is when we created our certificate, and then February the 25th is when our certificate will expire. Now, there are ways to configure automatic renewals if your assessments are, taking much longer than that. But that is entirely for a separate new video because it takes some configuration with certbot, but in our case 3 months will be more than enough. Now, one of the last configurations that we will perform before getting into Gophish will be setting up an SMTP relay server. Now, in order for Gophish to dispatch emails, it requires a communication interface, and this is achieved through SMTP, which establishes the set of standardized rules and procedures for transmitting and relaying email messages across networks. And Spark Post provides an intuitive relay service that perfectly suits this requirement. Now, in our case, we are using a free plan, but remember, in the case that you're performing larger scale assessments, you might want to upgrade this purely because you can only send out 500 emails per month, which might not be enough in certain instances. But anyway, to set up emails from our mail.salesforce.authidp.com domain, we must first add what is known as a sending domain, and essentially it defines the domain from which emails will originate and serve as the sender's identity. So to do this, we'll go into the configuration section here, and then if we scroll down here a little, we can select add sending domain. Now you have various different options that you can select here. We'll simply select the sending domain option, and then we'll need to supply the domain from which we will be sending emails from. And again, this is mail salesforce.auth idp.com. Once that's done, select save and continue. And one of the things that Spark Post will present to you is to configure domain alignment. Now, domain alignment is important because it ensures that our emails that are sent out consistently match the domain within the from header. And essentially failing to specify this will cause applications such as Microsoft Outlook to categorize the domain and subsequently the email as unverified. And that obviously stands out rather conspicuously and may alert recipients. So we'll select yes here, select save and continue. And then also we will need to prove that we own the domain once more. Now there are 2 records we need to add here. One is a TXT record and one is a CNAME record. So we will just copy this, copy, and go back into our domains, go into DNS. We're going to add a record, scroll down here, TXT, prove our identity once more. So make sure we configure this correctly, and then the CNAME record as well. So add record, CNAME, mail.salesforce.authidp.com, yes, value eu.sparkpost.com, and click save. Now, once these 2 have been added, you'll want to select this option here that specifies the TXT and CNAME records have been added to the DNS provider. Select verify domain, and then if everything is successful, you should receive two messages on the bottom left here that you have successfully verified DKIM record of mail.salesforce.authidp.com, and then also you have successfully verified the CNAME record of mail.salesforce.authidp.com. Perfect, and everything should be configured now correctly, and we should be able to send out emails using SparkPost as our client. Now, one of the other things that you will need to configure is an API key, which we'll get into shortly. But if we go into this SMTP settings section here, these will be the details that we use when configuring Gophish to use an SMTP relay client. So just copy these, store them somewhere securely where you can update Gophish later. So I will actually store this within a text editor here. You can actually remove the authentication options here and encryption, and these values here are the most important. Perfect, so the configuration options copied. The next thing that we'll need to do is set up a set of API keys. To do so, we'll go into the API keys section here. And as you can see here, I've actually created an API key before, so I'll just delete that before we make a new one. And to create a new API key, we'll simply select create API key, provide it a name. We'll use Gophish. And then also here, and this is quite important, you'll be able to configure the permissions for which the API has. Now, by default, you'll see here that the option is all. Obviously, we don't want to provide the permissions of such in the case that our API key gets exposed for some whatever reason. So we'll just simply select the select option here, and the only option that we need to enable is simply send via SMTP. Now you can select a list of allowed IPs. I suggest that you do so, but we'll simply select this option and create the API key. And once again, copy this, store it somewhere securely. And with that, we have SparkPost configured. So with all of our configurations out of the way, we can finally run Gophish. And if you've not already, just make sure you make it an executable first. Otherwise, you won't be able to execute it. So running Gophish here, you'll see upon running it for the first time, or running it for the first time without actually configuring Gophish at all, you'll be presented with a list of credentials. So as you can see here, we have the password for the admin account. Now I'll just copy the password here, and I'll open up a new tab, salesforce.authidp.com. 43333. As you see here, client send an HTTP request to an HTTPS server. So we just need to change that to HTTPS. By doing so, you'll see that we are prompted to accept a self-signed certificate, or more specifically, Firefox prompts that, there's a potential security risk ahead. Again, the client won't see this. It is only us that sees this. So, it's not really that important. We'll select advanced here and accept the risk and continue. And finally, we have our Gophish login prompt where we will be able to provide the username of the administrator account and then the password. Now, you will be prompted to reset your password. So I'll just use the same password with the exclamation point, and then also the same to confirm, and just simply select save password. Now, upon logging in for the first time, your dashboard will be empty, and to properly utilize Gophish, we need to set up 4 steps. Firstly, we will need a group that consists of the individuals who will be targeted by the phishing emails. Then we will need a template that will contain the phishing message, which will be sent out to each designated group. We will also need to configure a landing page that presents the visitors with a convincing web interface once they have interacted with the phishing email. And then lastly, we will need to configure a sending profile that will dispatch our emails. And with these 4 components in place, we should be able to create a new campaign and get that campaign running. So one of the first things we will do, select users and groups here. We will need to create a new group that contains a list of users. Now, in our previous video, we showed you how you can gather stuff like this and information like this. We utilized the harvester where we were able to scrape many different services that provided us with the emails of users. But in our case, I will only specify myself. So the first thing here, I will specify the name for the group. I'll simply specify HackerForce. You can actually import bulk users by using a CSV template for which you can download here, but you can also do so interactively. So I'll specify myself here. I don't even know what to put myself as a position. It's not really important, but you can create customized templates, which I'll show you later, according to the position of the specified user. But I'll just specify engineer for now. Once you've added the user, simply select add. And the user will be added to that specific group. Once you're done, simply select Save Changes and your group should be ready. In the case that you ever want to add more users to the groups, you can simply select this little pencil icon and create or add the user as we have done before. Now, with the users and groups configured, the next thing that we will need to configure will be an email template. And essentially an email template defines the template that will be used to distribute emails. Now, there are many different ways that you can create templates. You can use a built-in HTML editor, and this really allows us to customize our emails as convincing as possible, because we can use HTML style formatting, and we can actually import an email from its raw content. And this might be good, when you submit maybe a password reset to something like Microsoft, and then Microsoft sends you an email. Maybe you might want to use that same template that Microsoft used within your own email, and you can do so by importing it. So have a look at the documentation. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. There are various different ways, again, to create templates, and it really depends on how creative you wish to be. Now, as I've said before, there needs to be an aspect of social engineering when it comes to crafting phishing emails. We can't willy-nilly create emails and expect them to be clicked if we put no effort into them. So research indicates that individuals are typically most responsive to emails that generate a sense of urgency and concern, particularly those relating to account security issues, outstanding invoices, or other time-sensitive notifications that require immediate attention. Now, I will leave a link to a very useful study conducted by the SSL store, and essentially it outlines the pretext that the users are most likely to fall for. Now, in our case, we will use the same template that we showcased you at the start of the video. We'll simply select New Template here. And we will need to provide several key properties. So the first thing here we'll need to provide is the name of the template. We'll simply use Salesforce unusual activity. And then optionally, you can specify a sender, which will be the account from which the emails are sent from. Now, in this case, we will leave this as empty, as we will configure that later. And then here for the subject, you'll need to specify the header of the email or the title of the email. So we will use something like unusual activity on your Salesforce account. Now, again, you can be creative, but this is just an example. And then lastly, you'll need to provide the actual email body that will be sent. So in this case, we will specify that template that we used earlier. Just make sure we format it a little bit because it seems to be broken. As you can see here, essentially it urges a user to use the link below to review their recent activity. If all looks normal, they may ignore this email. Otherwise, they recommend to change the password. So the key principle is that the user will use this link to authenticate within the landing page that we serve, and they will supply credentials from which we will then be able to leverage later on within the assessment. Now, you can also add a tracking image, which will essentially monitor whether the user clicked on the email. And then also here you have that HTML section that we discussed earlier, where you can use various different HTML-like formatting to create your email templates instead. So I'm going to actually leave this as an exercise for you. In our case, we will simply use a basic textual template. Now, one of the useful options to know when you are configuring templates is the templates variables. And template variables are essentially placeholders that will automatically insert values based on the attributes of each individual email being dispatched. And as I mentioned earlier, the names and job titles that you can configure when creating a group these variables will use those values respectively. So here we have first name, so it will use something like Ervanas. Here we have last name, it will use something like Miltenis. The target's email address as well, if you want to, and then also the phishing URL as well. So I suggest that you have a look through these options. But if we go back into our template here, you'll see that it is quite generic in the sense of how it is presented to the victim. So it says here, dear user, which is quite, unusual. So instead, what we can use is the first name of the target. So just apply first name here, and then the URL is hard coded. But what we can do instead is use the URL variable to provide the phishing URL dynamically. So we'll just copy this as well. Paste it here instead. And essentially what we have here now is a dynamic way to, build templates according to each user that is receiving the email. Perfect. And with that done, we can save the template. And again, you can edit the template in the case that you might want to. But in our case, we will proceed to the landing pages. Now, beyond the phishing email itself, the other crucial component of our phishing attempt is the landing page. That will welcome the recipient once they've taken the bait. And this represents our opportunity to accomplish our primary objectives, whether that's, prompting the recipient to download a file, enter their credentials, or perform other desired actions. Now, to create a landing page, we'll simply select new page here. We need to provide it the name of the target landing page. So I'll just simply provide Salesforce, and then also and this is the key feature of Gophish, and this is really useful. You can import the site of the specific landing page you might want to replicate. Now, as our focus will be on credential harvesting, we will create a landing page that mimics the login portal of Salesforce. To do this, we will simply use Salesforce login, search for its login. There we go, we have the login. We'll simply copy this, copy the link that is, and import the site by pasting in the URL. And as you can see here, we have the exact replica of the Salesforce login page. And if we actually take a look at the preview, we'll see that it exactly mimics how the Salesforce login looks. As you can see here, salesforce.authidp.com. This is hosted on our server, not Salesforce, and this is the most powerful feature probably of Gophish. Now, one of the more important options that we will want to configure is whether we captured the submitted data or not. Now, obviously, this will depend, differently per assessment. We will select yes. And also we will capture the passwords. Now, keep in mind that the credentials that are captured will not be encrypted. And this means that the captured passwords will be stored in the database as clear text. Now, in the case that, somebody manages to hack our VPS server that is hosting Gophish, they could potentially dump this database and view the passwords of the employees for which the organization we are assessing. And obviously this is not something that we want. So this is why it is important to configure strong firewall rules as well as the authentication that we use to our VPS server. Now, once the credentials are submitted, we have the option to redirect the user to the legitimate website. And this is really useful to kind of build a pretext where the user believes that they may have mistyped their password or something, because the next time the user types their password, they will be typing it in to the legitimate Salesforce login prompt. So they will actually be redirected to the original site after having submitted credentials. So I hope that makes sense, and we will take the URL of the original Salesforce login, submit that here, and simply select Save Page. Perfect. So our landing page will both capture credentials and redirect the user once those credentials are submitted. Now, one of the last things we need to configure is the sending profile. And the sending profile essentially defines the SMTP server from which the emails will be dispatched from. So we will simply create a new profile. And remember, we previously saved this information. So the first option here actually is to provide the name of the profile. So I will just provide Spark Post, SMTP, and then comes the SMTP from, and this will be the email address from which all of the emails will be delivered from. So I will use something like admin at mail.salesforce.auth. If I can spell today, idp.com, and just keep in mind that this has got to match the domain for which we configured within Spark Post configuration earlier, and then we'll need to specify the host, so smtp.eu sparkpostmail.com. For the port we'll use 587. So just remove that, 587. And then we'll need to specify a username. So the username is SMTP injection. And then lastly, the password, which will be the API key, which we created earlier. Now you can also add custom email headers. This falls beyond the scope of this video, but you can do so if you want to. But to verify that everything's working correctly and that our emails are correctly being transferred, we can simply select send a test email. So this will simply send a test email to the account that we specify. So if we specify vinas.miltennis@hackerforce.io, we don't need to specify any of these as we are testing. And as you can see here, the email has been reportedly sent. If we go back into our email client, we've been marked as spam, but as you can see here, the email has successfully been delivered. Now there are ways to obviously overcome such spam categorizations, but that is going to be for another video. But if we take a look here, admin@mail.salesforce.authidp.com is the email sender, and everything else appears to work as it should. Perfect. So we'll just close this off, save the profile, and we have configured everything that we need to configure. Okay, so with everything configured, we can finally launch our campaign. To launch a new campaign, we'll simply select new campaign, and we will need to provide several key values. The first value will be the name of the campaign, as we are distributing this to several, or just myself actually, my own HackerForce account. I'll simply use HackerForce. The email template can remain Salesforce unusual activity. The landing page can be Salesforce, and then the URL, which will simply be https salesforce.authidp.com. And then here we also have launch date, which essentially specifies when the emails will be dispatched. So this will simply run it immediately. That's fine. Sending profile, this will be our SMTP server that we configured earlier. And then for the groups, we'll simply select HackerForce. So with that configured, we can launch the campaign. Let's select launch here, and here we are presented with the entire campaign's dashboard. So here you can see the amount of emails that were dispatched, the number of emails opened, whether the email's link was clicked, whether a user may have submitted data to that email, and how many of those emails were actually reported. And this is really useful when an organization wants to understand how many of their employees are aware of phishing attacks, how many employees report that email, etc. So the email for Vinas Miltennis has been sent. We can see some more details here. If we go back to our account, our email client, that is, again, we were categorized as spam. So if we click on this email, you can see, dear Vinas, we have suspected unusual activity on your Salesforce accounts. Use the link below to review your recent activity. If all looks good, you may ignore this email. Otherwise, we recommend you change your password. So if we click on this link here, we will be redirected to our phishing landing page. And one of the key properties here to note is this RID value. And essentially what this specifies is the exact user that has clicked on the link and the user that will submit the details. And this value is what Gophish uses to identify its users. Okay, so if we use just a random username, just say email tennis, and then for the password, we will use something like password 123. Upon clicking login, the credentials will be captured by Gophish. And then also, as you can see, we are redirected to the original website. So in this scenario, a user may try to log in again and be redirected to the actual Salesforce dashboard. But if we go back into our Gophish dashboard here, we can actually see some useful information regarding that email. So if we click refresh here, because we actually did submit the data, going back here on our specific account entry, we can see some relevant details on what the user performed once they clicked on that email. So as you can see, we have the specific device, the browser that was used, and then also we have the data that was submitted. And this is the crown jewels, right? If we click view details, we'll be able to see the specific parameters that were extracted. If we go down here enough, we will see the password in plain text and the username. Now, as an exercise, I will leave it to you to explore a tool named Goreport, which allows you to enhance the reporting capabilities by generating polished document reports that are suitable for client presentations. Now, it is pretty straightforward to use. You've got the requirements here, you've got the setup, the basic usage, and essentially how to generate the reports. So I really suggest that you take a look through it because it can be useful rather than having to manually create reports from scratch, which can take quite a lot of time, especially if your campaign is massive. Now, before we wrap up, previously I mentioned that emails can be categorized as spam, and the way it does so is that every single domain is assigned a specific category, typically, and most email services will look at these categories of domains and take best judgments of whether they want to permit that email or mark it as spam. Now, if we provide our URL here, so we have salesforce.authidp.com, select I am not a robot and click search here, you'll see that our email is actually categorized under the computer and internet info category. Now, even though we are low risk, we might have better chances if we changed our category to something entirely different. And you can request a change through the feature down here below, and then you'll be able to select the specific category that you want to classify your domain as. And then also you'll need to provide a comment for why this domain is being categorized the way it is being categorized, and then the email, and you'll be prompted to confirm that email as well. And essentially, by categorizing your emails and building your email templates in a way where they essentially match the categories, we have a higher chance of not being marked as spam. And keep in mind, this is just one technique that you can use throughout the abundance of techniques out there. But this is by far the most common. And that does it for phishing with Gophish. I really hope you found this video informative. By what we discussed, we essentially established a foundation from where we can conduct further phishing attacks. So we can implement sub-techniques within the emails that we deliver. For instance, we might use something like QR code phishing, but by building this infrastructure, we have established a complete foundation for which we can leverage for future attacks. Now, in the next video, we will take a look at HTML smuggling, a technique that is used to deliver payloads, and then we'll also take a look at link triggers and ISO images after that. And then finally, we will finish off with file fix, which is a common phishing technique today. So I hope to see you in the next one.